Hello and welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast. It is the Monday show on a Tuesday because Aaron has been on holiday, so he couldn't be back in time for yesterday. But yes, he made it back in one piece from Benidorm.
Yeah, just about in one piece. I think if we'd been doing this podcast yesterday, I think my voice was at a level where wouldn't have been able to hear us. But it's nearly back, and we're just keeping up this
Oh
tradition
my
of
God, you can tell
you
there
can
actually.
tell. Have you not noticed this all
No,
day?
haven't.
But we're just keeping up the tradition of all of a Monday show on a Tuesday. Honestly, Saturday and Sunday it was gone.
I'm gonna say you don't look all that tan though.
Well, sometimes you're just sitting in shaded bars, aren't you, rather than on the beach.
My weekend was, I imagine, slightly different to yours. Mine consisted of Saturday and Sunday hanging out. I would say close to 100, 120 baby grows maybe.
Wow,
On
yeah,
the
that's
washing line.
definitely different.
And then Sunday there was a surprise baby shower for the better half, and I got an insight to what my life is going to be like. So all the dads of the better halves who were at the baby shower went over to my dad's pub, including myself. Obviously, I'm a dad to be, and we just sat there mostly with non-alcoholic beverages, waiting for the better halves to finish their cocktails and what have you.
Yeah, there was no non-alcoholic beverages for my weekend, to be fair. So
yeah, slightly different weekends, but all fun nonetheless. And I'm actually in a way glad that we're doing it this podcast today, because if we'd done it yesterday, we wouldn't have had the statement from Alan St. Maxi on Instagram, which is just causing so much debate across social media. Now, we last week spoke about it, and you sat, I imagine, rather painfully on the fence. Following Alan St. Maxi's Instagram post, which I'll read out in a moment, has your mind shifted? You said last week you feel like you've never got a consistent answer. I feel like the consistency might come today by saying that again.
yeah, potentially. No, I think if we're going to dedicate a full podcast to it, I've got to give an answer, and I think my answer would be I would like Alan St. Maxi to stay. He's a game changer when he's fit and firing. He's Newcastle's most dangerous outlet. But as I keep saying, I just want that consistency. And I think last night's message on Instagram has thrown a little bit in the spanner in the works. I think it's got a few fans quite a bit worried.
Well, I'm going to read it. I'm not going to read all of it because it's quite lengthy. But we'll read some of it and try and pick apart. And then I've also asked for people to give their response to it, and I've got about 117 replies on social media, so I'll pick through the best of them as well. It's split, which is good as well for a debate. But anyway, this is what Alan St. Maxi posted on Monday night on his Instagram page. When I joined Newcastle in 2019, nobody understood my choice. I always believed in this club. As soon as I stepped onto the pitch, the fans directly adopted me. Since then, there's been highs and lows when we win the relegation zone, but I always believed in the team and trusted the project. Even if it was hard to stay in the Premier League, I knew the club deserved much better, and we had to prove it. I give everything on the pitch to keep the team at the highest level, and I am grateful that some people remember that. Goes on to say, I want really to thank all my best supporters for believing in me. It's because of you that I wake up every day more determined than ever. But even the people that criticize when it's fair, because sometimes the negative is beneficial to get up. And he goes on to say, I always try to be present on the pitch and give everything. I am so proud of the team and what we achieved. That's after obviously picking up injuries and what have you. And this is the intriguing bit. I am now entering a turning point in my career, and I will give everything until the end to achieve my dreams. It's often said that human beings forget quickly, but me, I won't be able to forget everyone that loved me for who I am and believe me in the difficult moments. It's in these hard situations that we see the real supporters. Thanks to everyone for the support. Whatever happens, I will always give everything when I have the chance to step onto the pitch. Now, you made a kind of a gasp there with the turning point remark, but for me, it's the whatever happens there in that last sentence. Whatever happens.
As I was scrolling down that post last night at about 9 o'clock, I was fully expecting to get to the bottom and see, right, that's it, goodbye, it's done. That does not sound like a man who is, preparing for another season with Newcastle United, if you ask me. And there was sort of this feeling for me last night where I thought, is that it? Or the club going to announce it? He's been sold. It's caught everybody on the hop. Very, very unusual if you put himself in his shoes as to why now was the right time to put something out like that out.
And like I said, it has just reignited this debate, or rather than reignite, it's just poured even more fuel onto the fire. And already, I didn't even ask the question in the live broadcast here, but Craig has already said sell. And it's really interesting when I looked at the responses I'd got earlier on Alan St. Maxi. So I just simply put, would you keep or would you sell? And like I say, it is relatively split. People are arguing that to keep him, like John Garney, keep him. He says we need his quality in the squad, especially with Champions League games to play next season. The only caveat to that is it does depend on what sort of fee we might be offered. 50 million plus, and perhaps we could reinvest wisely. 30 million pound is nowhere near enough. So let's start on that point. Price tag. We know footballers can go for extortionate amounts, even when they've maybe not had the best season or two. What price do you think Newcastle would sell at?
Look, they bought him for what, 16, 20 million all those years ago. He's got a lot of Premier League experience under his belt now. He's done it at this level for a while. You know, Prem teams know there's no one really like him. I think you'd probably be looking for 40, 50 million, somewhere in that region. I think 40 would be the lowest you'd go. I think anything around 50, they'd have to be tempted.
Lee Robson says, keep him. He's something completely different to the rest of the team and league. If injuries can be managed with rotation and if he can find his consistency, he's a huge asset. And that's a really interesting comment from Lee, because I think even St. Maximin's harshest critics would not doubt he is an asset. But the things that Lee's mentioned there in that tweet, injuries, consistency, they're two reasons why people might say, well, actually, let's cash him, because he picks up too many injuries and he's not consistent enough.
Yeah, and this is why, I was sat on the fence last week, and it's why I'm not sat here saying keep him. There's no way they can sell him. How many times have we sat there this season and Maxi's put a blinder and then 2 weeks later he's missing? And there's never been that level, certainly not in the last 18 months, anyone, Eddie Howe, where every week in, out, like Joelinton, like Bruno, you're going to probably get an 8 out of 10. And I think that is a negative in his game. But yeah, Lee makes some good points there. On his day, there isn't really anyone like him.
I'm just chuckling there because you said, in a sentence about consistency and putting performance, you referenced Joelinton, which still blows my mind. And we're going to do the end of season awards at the end of the show. And Joelinton is going to feature heavily, I would assume. But yeah, just to be talking about Joelinton in a positive light, consistent positive light, is something that still surprises me. Michael says, sell. We aren't ASM United. I don't get the uproar at all. He's a good player. We've got great players now. He's reached his ceiling and he can't learn the way we play. Better for him to move on for his own sake. And someone did respond to him saying, in which way has he reached his ceiling? Someone else responded saying, reached his ceiling. Are you mad? It's interesting though, because I do think there are elements of what Michael said there that are true. I don't think he is disciplined enough to be a full-time starter in Eddie Howe's side.
Yeah, we've seen this argument a lot bannered around, and it's just very convenient that it was Dan Burn behind him every week, and Dan Burn's the player where really you need a bit of cover. Joelinton and Joe Willock were doing that role so well, offering so much defensive support as well as going forward, and you never really get that with Maxi. But now in this Eddie Howe team where you've got to be busting a gut in both directions, but also just to play devil's advocate, that injury that he got first time around at the start of the season was because he made an 80-yard run back into the box to try and defend a Wolves counter-attack or whoever it was against. I think there was signs towards the end that he was getting it and starting to understand how to play. His final ball was better. He wasn't taking on his man as much. But then when he does that, he looks restricted and he's not playing his natural game. So for him, does he want to go to a team where he's just going to have to attack? He doesn't have to do the dirty side of it. He can be himself. Or does he stay in a team where he's maybe not suited anymore because of what he's being asked to do?
Some comments on our live broadcast here. Paul says, cash in on him. Craig says, too many injuries. He would take 35 million from. Roger's gone for 1 million more, 36. He says, I can't see anyone offering 50 million for him. Mark says, we could get good money for Alan St. Maximin and then put that towards Diaby, which will please Aaron. Baz says, Andrew doesn't want him. It's not necessarily a case that I don't want him. I just don't think he's necessarily right for this Newcastle United side.
But
and
isn't this so funny though? Because how down the middle is it? It's literally 50-50. Yeah. And it just shows how polarizing he's become. Whereas if we were asking this question 2 years ago, it would have been probably, what, 95% keep him, if not more.
Yeah.
It just shows how much he's
how far Newcastle have
off.
come.
And yeah.
I mean, Paul says on Twitter, with a heavy heart, it's sell for me. Maxi jogging back when we were under the cosh defensively at Leeds was the final straw. And there's a lot of comments actually, which just say basically just trust the process. You know, Alan says it doesn't matter what the fans want; the club will do what they feel is best for me. And there's a lot like that basically just says it's up to Eddie Howe and up to the transfer team, and what they decide is what you know they'll do. You know, here Lambeth Mag, I trust the process because so far they've got nothing wrong. Is this all about him not being the main focus of attention anymore? We aren't as reliant on him as we once were. For me, it's all about whether Maxi wants to fit or not. Has he still got the hunger? And for me, that's the main point, actually. Trust the process, and can Alan St-Maximin accept he's not going to be the star man anymore?
And maybe he doesn't want to be that. Maybe he knows if he drops down a little bit down the league, he's going to be the main man again at somewhere like Everton or somewhere like Wolves or a team like that. It's crazy to think that, and I touched on this last week in the Chronicle's very first interview with Amanda Staveley. One of the questions she was asked is, are you going to build a team around Alan St-Maximin? And now, arguably, if every single player in that squad's fit, he might not even get in the starting 11. And when you think of how many options they've got out on that left now, Joelinton, Gordon, Anderson, Willock, if they want to do it. Does he want to play second, third fiddle? I don't know.
Gary says, I don't think it matters. He isn't a guaranteed starter. Yes, he's capable of magic, but inconsistent and injury prone. If he's replaced by Madison or somebody like that, then we have to move on. The club is progressing. Colin, clearly not a fan of Alan St-Maximin, says 1000% sell. Sign someone more consistent, fitter, and available more often, more productive, scores more goals, more of a team player, someone who doesn't cut inside every time and try to shoot. Other than that, yeah, we'll keep him.
Very interesting is there on that comment as well, Paul saying that Maxi's message was the final straw for him. That message last night made him think, oh, actually, he should sell. Has he really shot himself in the foot by releasing that message? Because if he's put that message out without anything being agreed, he hasn't left the club, you know, is it sending out the right message that he's sort of, you know, playing fast and loose with the supporters? I don't know. Maybe that message is actually going to do him no favours further down the road. And yeah, that's an interesting point by Paul.
We were discussing in the office yesterday before you returned from Benidorm, before Maxi posted the message about if he moves to an AC Milan or it goes back to Ligue 1, he'll absolutely tear those leagues up, and maybe that is a move that he would consider because he's going to find he's going to have more opportunity, and it's maybe going to be a little bit easier for him to reach his full potential.
Yeah, potentially. And it goes back to, again, what a lot of fans are commenting on Twitter and in this live right now. Does he have the right mentality to stomach the fight? Does he want to, you know, win his place back? Or is he just thinking, well, I can go anywhere else and be a superstar? And ultimately, Eddie Howe wants players that are going to fight for their place and fight for it. And next season, he will get chances if he stays. They're going to be fighting in 4 different competitions. You know, Joelinton can't stay fit all the time. Willock can't stay fit all the time. Gordon has already had his problems. There's an opportunity there for him. It's just whether he wants to take it or not.
Chris says, we need a bigger squad. He's not the main man anymore, but he's still one of the most talented guys in the squad. So I say keep him. Wonder if he's decided he wants to go, and the club will allow it because they'll make a decent amount of money for him. And just as the comments are split on Twitter, the comments are split here. Sam Mulner from Newcastle Fans TV says, I've said it once, I've said it 1,000 times. Keep him. Stuart says, going by game plan, he's only going to be a super sub moving forward. If he doesn't want that, and it's time to cash, then it's time to cash in on him. And I think a lot of people are saying the same thing, and that's one of the interesting things. Brilliant player, talented, but as we've mentioned, it's all about whether his mentality is right, and if he has that fight where he's going to accept he's starting from the bench, essentially.
And there's two points that, you know, have been going through my head and we haven't mentioned them yet. And one is the fact that, you know, Newcastle United don't have too many sellable assets. In terms of players they would realistically talk about selling, Maxi's probably the one that they're going to get, you know, a decent amount for. That has got to be factored in, given that they're sticking to financial fair play. They don't have that many decent revenue streams at the minute. and any of Eddie Howe's budget this summer is going to have to be funds that the club have put up, plus a lot of it is going to have to be on players that can sell. And number two, go back to January, John Joe Shelby, Chris Wood, both said, we want to go to Forest. It's better for our careers. We don't want to leave, but we're going to get more game time. And Eddie Howe, even though Newcastle shot themselves a bit in the foot in January, letting those players go so late on, Howe said, I don't want to stand in his way. And if Maxi's gone to him this week and said, look, it's time to go, I'm not the main man anymore, you bet Eddie Howe's saying, fair enough, I'm not going to try and keep you otherwise.
The Mighty Win says, Maxi and 70 million for Rice. Yes. Ambitious there from the Mighty Win. The Coin of Frez says, still a massive weapon in our arsenal. We'd struggle to get a Maverick for the same price. And I 100% agree with that. I think as does Aaron, as does mostly to everyone watching and listening. But again, it comes down to whether St. Maximin wants to be that Maverick on the bench. And if I put myself in his shoes, would I want to be the Maverick on the bench? You know, with that talent, where I could go I could go back to France, to Italy, Spain, and perform really, really well and potentially win things, or do I play, you know, essentially a second part role here?
It must be hard on a personal level as well for him. He came to this club, there was a lot of fanfare with him. Instantly, fans loved him. He was the fan favourite. And under Steve Bruce, he was the man that everything went through. All of a sudden, you're having to, you know, we're even having this conversation now about whether to sell him or not. It must be hard for him personally to deal with that. And maybe he thinks, look, I've had a great time here. I don't want to fall further down the pecking order if I keep getting injured. Let's leave on a high. I would love to know what is going through his head at the minute.
Yeah, Freddie says game changer. We should keep. And yeah, it's interesting because you don't post that being naive to the reaction. So what is the reason behind him posting that? Is he like you say, on one hand, maybe he's decided he wants to go. Maybe he knows he's going potentially. Is he forcing the issue to Newcastle? He's saying, you know, publicly saying, look, I feel like I'm not being utilised enough. Maybe it's time to move on. Is he forcing the debate again? Is he trying to reignite the debate? What is he doing, do you think?
Honestly, I don't know. That last night, as I said at the top of the show, that read like a man who had already signed a deal to go. That message, you don't write that unless you're on your way out, surely.
If you're a potential buyer of St. Max, when you read that and you were thinking about picking up the phone, you'd be on the phone now, wouldn't you?
Turning point in his career. You know, thank you for all the support. Whatever happens next, thanks to
it had everything but a goodbye.
Everything but. I fully expected, as I said, to get to the bottom of that post and see it's been a great 2 years, but it's time to go. And I fully expected an hour later the club to put out a statement saying
he's gone. He's
gone. And the fact that hasn't came and that we're now just sort of left in limbo a little bit, and this is going to rage on, you'd think. He's confused me a lot.
If you're Newcastle United though, and you've got Max, he's banged on the door. He said, "Look, I want to leave. I want to go somewhere where I'm guaranteed first team football." Do you allow him to move to another Premier League club, or do you try your very best to get him abroad and keep him out of the Premier League?
I don't know. I think if the money's right for Newcastle, I don't think they'd have any qualms about selling to a Premier League club. Personally, that being said, if I'm completely honest, who in the Prem takes him? There's lots to talk about Spurs. I can't really see that. Does he then have to drop down the league? Is that what he wants to do? You know, move from a Champions League club to a club that was fighting relegation this season? It's that in itself is quite strange. You would think, you know, finishing in the top 4, playing in the Champions League for what I'm guessing was the first time since his Nice days, if he's even played there at all, that would be a huge selling point for me to stay, even if I wasn't first choice or man of the moment. But again, it goes back to his character, and does he want that?
But are you also thinking of your St. Maximin? Yes, potential Champions League football next season, but I'm also very aware that they did this largely without me this season, and that just reaffirms your knowledge that you're not first choice.
Yeah, it goes back to what everybody's saying is, does he have the fight? And judged on that message alone last night, I'm not sure.
The Mighty Win says, when he tries to fit in, bless him, love him, and be forever grateful. But when he tries to be a team player, he loses his magic, which is simply not often enough. Yeah, and I agree with that. I think he does look restricted at times. Craig says, could he go off to Burnley? Perhaps you could maybe see him is Sean Dyche at Everton, perhaps? I
Yeah,
mean,
maybe.
I don't know how much money they've got to spend.
I don't know.
Do you see him moving to you mentioned Spurs there. Do you see him moving to one of those kind of top 8 sides? We'll include Chelsea in there as well.
I think if you had asked me 2 years ago, yes. I think I'm not saying he's regressed personally, but I think his standard in the game has probably gone backwards in the last year, purely because, as you say, Newcastle have done this without him largely for the season. But then again, if you're a scout at any of these Newcastle games where he absolutely tears Kyle Walker a new one, he's the best man on the pitch in the defeat against Liverpool. He's blinding in the win at Man United back in April. You're looking at that and thinking, 100% I'd take the free and get him for 30, 35 million. But then if you go to any of the other games and he's having an absolute stinker, I don't know, he splits opinion, and I bet any clubs watching him are probably looking at that and thinking, is he going to be consistent enough?
Gene says, got to keep Maxi. We were told how I was going to build a team around him. I would be gutted if he goes. I think it's a test now of Eddie Howe's man management skills, isn't it? We know every player in the sun that's been under Eddie Howe often talks about how good he is with the players, and also, Jason Tyndall and what have you. This is going to be a big test, because I think on one hand, he will definitely want to keep Anson Maxman. As loads of people said in the comments, on his day, unstoppable, should be a good impact player to bring off the bench if his mindset's right. And that's what Eddie Howe's got to try and work out. If I persuade him to stay, is he going to be all right for the first 6 weeks? But then between September and January, when we can get rid of him, he might become a disruptive influence because he's not getting the game time that he clearly wants.
Howe said it perfectly on the last game of the season when he was asked, straight to the point. Because Maxi, Newcastle's best outlet in that first half against Chelsea, one of the first questions he's asked, where does his future lie? And Howe's response was, that is completely up to him. And I think that was, if he wants to stay and fight at this club, brilliant, because I'll happily keep him. If he doesn't, and he doesn't want to stay, and he wants to go somewhere else to be the main man, or he wants to do whatever, I won't stand in his way. And I think Howe's made that his point, so far, as that he's not going to keep any player at the club beyond their will.
Christopher says if he stays in the Premier League, he will go to an Everton or a Villa. Stuart says, I think he'll move somewhere new where he will be given a license to play his natural game. I can't see him staying in the league. It's certainly going to be interesting to see what happens with that. I mean, just to finish off on the topic before I ask you to give me a concrete answer to whether you'd sell or keep him, Aaron. If you are Eddie Howe, and I'm going to say he's lying on a sun lounger somewhere, which I highly doubt. I bet he's at the training ground right now. And you saw that, given what time he posted, 7:30, so Eddie Howe would have been about 2 hours away from actually leaving the training ground. Mm-hmm. You see that Instagram post. What are you thinking?
I think if you're Eddie Howe and you haven't had a prior conversation with Maxi, or you didn't know he's feeling like this, you would be thinking, I'm not too sure how I feel about that. I don't think you'd be very happy. I think if I was a manager, the manager of Newcastle United, and I saw that out the blue with no warning, I would think, has his agent just done a deal behind our back and sold him somewhere else? I think if he's already had the conversation with Eddie in the last couple of weeks, and Eddie knows the score, I don't think he'd be too big. But I would love to just be on the fly in the wall in Maxi's house today and know the ins and outs of what's gone on with this.
I'm sure we all would. Post. Right. A concrete answer then. Let's say a bid comes in. 45 million. That's where we're starting. Are you selling Anson Maxman?
Honestly, right. There's. I know we've just spent 20 minutes pouring over the pros and cons, but look, he's a unique player. The fans love him. He would be a brilliant asset to this football club next season, starting or not. But Newcastle don't have any sellable assets. He might not want to stay. He doesn't score that many goals. Can you see why I've permanently got splinters? But I think 45 million, I'd be leaning towards selling him.
Would you be more comfortable at selling him if they've already gone out and got a replacement?
Yeah, 100%. I think Maxi, as I've said this for a long time, he doesn't score that many goals. He doesn't assist that many goals. If they go out and buy a proven left winger who is going to guarantee you 10 or 15 goals a season, that softens the blow massively. So I would feel a lot better if I knew who was coming in. But as we said a couple of weeks ago, I'm really, really excited for Anthony Gordon next season. So, yeah.
We've got Roger saying £45 million gone. Paul says sell. Craig says sell. Stuart says 100% sell, 45 million. Mighty Win says 45 million gone. Anthony would take 35 million. Christopher says I would keep him. And
I think 45 million you'd sell him.
Moffon says we've got to keep Maxi as well. I think the debate's just fantastic. And it is one of those times where you do have to just sit back and you just kind of are amazed at just literally how down the middle
I've never seen a Newcastle United debate split opinion as much as this. I just don't think you'd get this with any other player other than Maxi.
The Blubber King, what a name that is. He says he can tear up the Champions League. Give him a shot. He's better than Gordon, unfortunately. Well, that remains to be seen. I think we now are both in agreement. Full preseason for Anthony Gordon, and we're going to see the best of him. But yes, let us keep with the comments in on Twitter as well. Thank you for all your comments on St. Maximin. Keep them coming in, your views as well. We love to have a bit of response from you guys. Let's move on to then some other transfer news. We'll start with the latest on Szoboszlai. Is that right?
You're getting there. You're getting there.
I'm getting there. It's
Slowly
the first
but
time I've
surely.
tried.
Szoboszlai, yeah.
Szoboszlai?
You're getting there, yeah. No
Right.
slobs. So
Slob.
Yeah.
Slob. What is the latest then?
yeah, so look, Leipzig, as far as I've been told, are resigned to losing him. They're already sort of putting plans in elsewhere to replace him. And they've also persuaded their captain Danny Olmo to stay in Newcastle. Though, everyone knows this release clause, 70 million euros, 60 million pounds, is proving a little bit of a sticking point. Newcastle would really like to ideally drop that. Leipzig at the minute are holding out. It could be one of those where it goes late in the window and one of the sides, probably Leipzig, have to sort of, move their valuation a little bit. But certainly a player Newcastle United like. They've scouted him a lot of times. He had a fantastic season in the Bundesliga last year, and he's sort of making no bones about the fact he wants to leave this summer.
A question from Krista Lundqvist. Is the situation now Madison or Szoboszlai, or is it possible that the club want both, when both players can play in the middle and on the wings? And if you had to choose between them, who would you prefer?
I think it's certainly the case that it would be one or the other. I can't see them going out and spending 50, 60 million on Szoboszlai and then having to fork out another pretty much the same fee, if not maybe a little bit less, for Madison, who has, that comment says, plays in the same position. I can't say I've seen enough of Szoboszlai to compare him to Madison. I don't watch the Bundesliga every week. Can sort of only go off clips I've seen and what people out there say, and they all say he's a really, really good talent. He's captain in Hungary at 22. I think I would be more leaning towards him than Madison.
Now, last week we spoke on the podcast about Newcastle having to shop clever, and we said about the budget, free agents, championship buys potentially, and there were a few comments. So I wrote that up as an article, put it out, and there were a few comments kind of saying we're being a wee bit silly. You can't shop clever when you have Champions League football on the agenda. But let's make no bones about it. There isn't an open checkbook here. They're going to have to be very resourceful. They're going to have to be really clever with what they spend, even with the new shirt sponsor coming in, even with the money they've gained from finishing fourth and the revenue from the TV and what have you. They're going to have to really crunch those numbers to make sure that they stick within financial fair play.
Oh, absolutely. I think, we've got the perfect example here at Newcastle of why shopping clever and signing a relegated goalkeeper for 10 million could actually be a masterstroke, and that's from Nick Pope last season. So many decent teams going down and so many decent players going down this season. As I've touched on, I've got absolutely no problem with them going out and signing players that are, otherwise going to be playing in the Championship next season. So, as you say, they haven't got an endless pot of money. That's why, on Szoboszlai, they're holding their ground and trying to get the price down, because they know they've only got a certain budget plus the players that they sell.
Which is when the topic about Maxi potentially being sold comes into play.
100%, because otherwise, look around that squad, okay? Bruno, Isak, Botman, Joelinton, you're not going to sell them this summer, pure and simple, unless they're literally knock on the door and say, I want to go, which they're not going to. If you don't sell Maxi, the players you're going to be selling are probably going to get you 5, 6, 7 million, the likes of Jeff Hendrick or Isaac Hayden or, Ryan Fraser. They're not going to bring you much money in. if they want to really top up that kitty to maybe afford someone like Madison, that's when the Maxi deal comes into play. And you think, actually, if it's a like-for-like swap, it's maybe a good bit of business.
Now, Jamie Rubin, corner of Newcastle, has appeared on the Business of Sport podcast, which is out today. Really interesting listen. And he mentions about financial fair play. So, explaining the costs of running the club, the corner said on the podcast, it's a correlation of what your goals and ambitions are. So, if you want to elevate the team, we've seen transfer prices keep going up. So, it costs money to bring in players. It seems like that will continue to go up. There might be blips, but that seems to be on an upward track. In order to meet financial fair play, which we're adamant we're going to do, we're going to play by the rules. We're long-term investors. You need to invest in your stadium. You need to invest in your infrastructure. You need to invest in other non-footballing parts of your business to get the commercial revenue up in order to financially invest on the pitch and elevate your status, which is a long-term plan, especially with some of the other clubs. You've seen the amount they've spent. FFP means we can't do that just yet. So we have to make sure our pound really has to go further than a Manchester City, Chelsea, or Liverpool. I mean, so much to pick from that. I think the first thing that springs to mind is that they're well aware of the constraints of financial fair play. They know what they're dealing with, and they have a plan. And it is about making sure that every kind of source of revenue is tapped into, as he's talking about there, investing off the pitch, non-football inside of things. And we're seeing that with the shirt sponsor, which £25 million is the rumoured income, which isn't huge in the grand scheme of things, but you expect in years that will only continue to grow as Newcastle do.
No, I mean, that point he makes there about making that pound go further than City is plain and simple when you see Newcastle are getting £6 million for their Fun 88 sponsorship, and Man City are getting 67 million for the exact same deal, with the Etihad. So Darren Eales has spoke about it a lot whenever he speaks to the fans, whether he gives interviews. He always talks about the club being in investment mode, and that meaning that they need to have these revenue streams, whether that's selling the naming rights St James's Park or getting the fan zone up and going just for extra streams. And I think over the next couple of years, we'll see the match day revenue certainly increase. The commercial revenue will go through the roof compared to what it has been. But until that happens and they start combining that with selling the likes of Isaac and further down the road, I'm not saying that's going to happen, but once they can start maybe selling these players on for a little bit more than they bought them. But until that, as you say, they've definitely got to watch what they're spending.
And I mean, part of that point about making the pound go further is about maybe going into untapped markets, whether it be the Championship, maybe even League One, or going across to the Danish or the Swedish leagues. And last week we saw the first kind of transfer news, the imminent signing, isn't it, of Yankuba Minte, I think I've pronounced that right, a young player who is playing over in Denmark. Yeah, that's my geography. A level there, coming to strength. £5.8 million said to be close. Wasn't in the squad over the weekend. It was a playoff as well, so he would have played a big part in that. His imminent arrival, is it a sign of things to come in terms of going after that younger player from a league which isn't held as high as Ligue 1, Serie A, La Liga? So maybe they need a bit more work. Maybe he gets loaned back out. Maybe he gets loaned to a championship club. But it's you see the long-term investment plan that maybe Jamie Rubin's talking about there.
Absolutely. I mean, you only have to take one look at what Dan Ashworth did at Brighton, and that was scour the globe and go to the most obscure leagues. I mean, Moises Caicedo, the player that if he goes this summer, Brighton are probably going to get 75 million for, was signed from the Ecuadorian top league for 4 million. I mean, what he did at Brighton and turning these sort of unknown gems into players that eventually will earn Newcastle millions is just ridiculous. And I think we're seeing it with Minter when he joins, and we're also going to see it with Grant Kowal, when he starts to settle in at the club. And there'll be more. I mean, they've already started picking the best players from Ireland and Scotland, and the likes of Alex Murphy and Jude Smith. So 100%. And I think in the next 2 or 3 years, that youth setup will look entirely different.
Stuart says Szoboszlai is an absolute jet and has the potential to be one of the world's best. I do like Madison too, but Szoboszlai is different gravy. And the fact they've got to scout him several times suggests just how much they really do like him, and they, as you say, will just be working to get the very best deal, or as Jamie Rubin says there, to make sure their pound goes the furthest.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Dan Ashworth came out and said in the past that, you know, it's about it's not sustainable to keep signing players for the here and now. They need to be, you know, really strengthening this youth setup so that they've got players that'll eventually will have cost them no money or near enough, you know, no money, 7 million or whatever mint it's going to be. But over time, when they're in the first team every week, you know, they're getting a lot for their money.
Les says, what about Guy Gurez from Coventry? Mentioned him on last week's episode. Someone we believe Newcastle have watched. You know, clearly a talent in that first tier. Always going to be a big step up. Likely to cost in the region of 20, 25 million. So won't be necessarily all that cheap. But I do think someone like him who offers a different style of play to what they've got in terms of Isak and Wilson is who they should be targeting. There's some, I know it's another debate about whether they need a striker. For me, they 100% do need a striker. And yeah, do you know, I would like someone with a bit more Premier League experience, perhaps, but that's not easy to come by. So if they can get the right price for someone like Guy Gurez, and then yeah, why not?
That's the gamble, isn't it? Spending 20, 25 million on a player who is very young but's never played Premier League football. It's a huge risk, but I suppose so is signing these youngsters from, you know, very, very obscure leagues as well. So they won't get it all right. You know, I mean, so far they've done so well to not really have a dud. But I think, you know, over time, we might see one or two just slip through the net a bit.
We mentioned Dan Ashworth. It's a year to the day since he started his role at Newcastle United.
Really feels like a lot longer. He's done a lot in that time, hasn't he?
Marks out of 10 for those first 12 months.
I mean, you've got to be pushing close to a 10. I think what they've done, you know, signing wise has been ridiculous. The culture that they've, you know, managed to harness at the club, the youngsters that they've brought in. I mean, yeah, 9, 10, it's got to be up there, hasn't it?
We'll go 9 because you can always improve, can't you? True. The other name that was linked, but we don't believe Newcastle will be making a move for him, is Gabriel Vega from Celta Vigo. He's got Liverpool chasing him, Barcelona, Real Madrid. Looks a right talent.
Looks really good, yeah.
45 million the release clause, but we don't think he's at the top of the list for Newcastle.
No, I think he's one that has been linked, but I don't know if it's just one of those that Newcastle names just been thrown into the mix because they're Newcastle and they've got, you know, all this money now. I think there's absolutely no doubt that he's leaving. He was obviously in floods of tears last night when he or the other night when he, you know, played what looked like his final game. They're not going to be able to sign them all. You know, there's going to be linked with a lot of players where they've probably got a very, very big interest in them, but the pull of Barcelona and Madrid is still going to be very, very strong, especially for players who are playing in La Liga already.
Your question just overall on spend. So say Szoboszlai is available for 70 million, right? That's what he's going to go for. That's what Newcastle have to spend. Their budget is what? Put a number on it. 100, 120, 150 million.
Plus whatever they get off.
So that's just our opinion. We're not saying that's, you know, that's just our view, right? For this scenario. Would you prefer them to go out and sign 3 or 4 players and have them in the club on the books and then go out and splash big? Or is it, I'm just thinking in terms of you go out and splash big on one player, then the budget's instantly halved, and then you're leaving yourself with not all that much money to then go and fill the rest of the gaps, because in my view, they will need at least 5, maybe 6 players. And I'm just wondering which way you would prefer to work. I mean, in an ideal, you're never going to get it how you want it to work. But if you could, would you rather them go out and sign those 4 good quality players and they've got them in the bag, and then the rest of the budget can go on someone who is the next level? And it might not be Szoboszlai, but you know the budget you've got left to work with.
I think I'll be in the minority here, but I think I would prefer them to just go and get a lot of depth. If let's just say the budget's 100 million, I would love that spread over 5, 6 players, a couple of youngsters thrown in there. I've seen a lot of people calling it for go the other way. Go out and spend 60 on Szoboszlai, go out and spend 30 on a left back, someone like Kieran Tierney, and then go out and spend 30 million on a winger. And I've seen a lot of people more than happy to do that. But for me, I think you look at that start 11 and next season, really, depending on who they sign, you can see a lot of that start 11 still being together. I think 75% of that back 4 will probably be together. Who do you really want to drop out of Joelinton and Bruno, Willock, Longstaff in the middle? fair enough. On the wings, you've probably got a bit of an option. You don't need a new striker to come in and start. I think I would just love to get a little bit more depth, strengthen the bench a bit, one or two new first team additions, and just make sure that they're going into Champions League games next season. If their injury hit, doesn't matter as much that you're missing Bruno and Joe Linton because you've got 2 or 3 midfielders that can fill in. But that's just my opinion.
Interesting you mentioned there, Kieran Tierney, who Newcastle clearly have an interest in. They've watched him. They like him. 30 million is reportedly the price tag. It's just one of those, isn't it? Like, do you gamble, because he has got quite a horrendous injury record. He's played quite a few times towards the end of the season. No doubt in his quality. But again, if you're spending 30 million out of a budget of, let's say, 150, that's quite a large chunk to then gamble on someone who has unfortunately got a pretty poor injury record.
Yeah, it is a bit of a gamble, and there's no doubt and there's a quality player there. It's rumored that it's Newcastle and Villa, the two teams chasing him. I think Newcastle have actually got the big advantage there because obviously Scottish lad, he's going to be close at home.
Champions League
football. But as you say, it is a bit of a risk. There's no doubt in that fully fit. I think he walks into that start 11. But do you maybe go abroad and look for someone like, last summer it was all about Renan Lodi at Atletico, who obviously ended up going to Forest now, quite a decent season. Is there better options out there for that price? Maybe.
Harmeet says we need quality players, not quantity. Roger says we're too safe as an investment business to go high risk. And Les says, doesn't it depend on how deals are structured? Don't always have to pay the price up front, which is very true. It's going to be interesting to see how they do indeed structure those deals. But want to keep an eye on is Kieran Tierney. Lots of rumours and whispers. Others more confident than some that the deal is pretty much done and dusted. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see how that one plays out. Just a word on the news over in Saudi Arabia. Obviously, people would have on Monday seen the announcements about the Public Investment Fund and the top 4 clubs over there in the Saudi League and what's going on there. We're not going to talk about it in this episode because we don't want to talk about it when we don't know too much about it. Aaron is going to do an article which will be on Chronicle Live on Tuesday evening about 5 o'clock. And then later in the week, Aaron will do a sit-down piece to camera for our YouTube channel when he's got a bit more knowledge, a bit more understanding. He's spoken to a few people about it because we don't just want to pretend we know what we're talking about when we're still trying to get our heads around it. So watch out for that later in the week, and I hope you understand why we're doing that. Word for Fun88, no longer the sponsors, although the statement didn't really spell it out, but that's what we believe it does mean. The sponsors are gone and we're expecting a new sponsor probably in the next week or so.
Yeah, it's looking pretty imminent. I think, especially if you go back to the years gone by, it's usually around this time in June where they'll announce something very, very unusual for them to, get rid of a shirt sponsor, but actually keep them as, a partner. Funny, obviously staying on as their Asian betting partner next season, which I'm sure will be very interesting. But yeah, I think certainly the next couple of days we'll see this new front of shirt sponsor. Yeah,
and because if you go on the club website, you can no longer buy the replica kit from the season just gone because it's not there. So that suggests that the kit launch is imminent. There's been a very interesting post on social media today, which is doing the rounds of Kieran Trippier, Bruno, one of the players from the women's side in the proposed new kit with the sponsor on the front.
Seller.
So, of course, we haven't had that confirmed. We don't, at the moment, think that is a real image, although it looks very legit. I tell you what, though, if it is that, it's a very nice design.
Yeah, it does look better, I think. I think when you compare that, the leaked images where it's got the black sponsorship, looks a lot better than having blue on the front of that kit for me, I think.
Yeah, and I think because Newcastle in the Champions League, and I think Castor's kits have been really good, actually, the design of them. But also, when you're in the Champions League and you've got millions more an audience and million more potential buyers of the shirts, you're going to up your game a little bit. And I think the kit this season will be, or next season rather, will be a good one, I think.
Were you a fan of the big number 4 on the shirt? Not the season, but
I didn't hate it. I didn't hate it.
I just can't get up my head every time I see it. It's like, why is there a big 4 there?
I think the season just gone, that kit was...
Yeah, this kit in the season's gone was much
I like
nicer.
the blue one as well.
Plain,
The blue one was lovely. So yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see the new kit, which we assume will come in the next few days. Training ground, we saw a video that the club posted with Shola Amiobi doing a return to his Cribs episode from MTV all those years ago. I love the reference to him eating an apple as well.
Small details, isn't it?
I don't think he's going to be replacing Gary Lineker Match of the Day anytime soon, however. Or myself on this podcast. You can come on as a guest, though, Shola, if you want. But yeah, stick to sorting out the loan deals for the youngsters. However, looking round the training ground, we know the work that's been done to it, but it was really nice to get a look at it. Just the outside of it looks so much better, but to have those facilities in there, you had poor Matty Longstaff in the I don't know what, in the ice bath kind of thing, and then you had the swimming pool and what have you. You know, Lee Charnley famously said no one's ever not joined the club because of the training ground. Well, I tell you what, the training ground, when you walk into there, if Samari was within a chance of joining Newcastle this summer and he got St. Maximum to FaceTime him to look around, I think his answer would be a wee bit different this time around.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's probably a little hint as to why Lee Charnley hasn't, stuck around and been offered a position with a new ownership. I mean, the changes they've made, they've so many small details moved. I mean, even Eddie Howe sticking up the photos of the team photos when they've had a win. I love that.
I did enjoy how rattled
Manchester United fans didn't
Everton
enjoy
fans.
that. Yeah.
But
that's what we want. We're not here to be.
They really took it personally.
Yeah,
it wasn't personal. It was one of 16, 17 wins this season.
I still love the fact that they do the team photo on Twitter after a win, and everyone's like, "Oh, you've only beaten Palace." It's like, yeah, but you do realize that they've done this for 2 years. It's not just because they've won that one game.
The reaction was something special. But yeah, I mean, the changes will make a difference. It makes you, I imagine, want to actually go in.
100%. And I think it was very interesting hearing Eddie Howe speak the other week about the returning players coming back from loan. I mean, Isaac Hayden, even though he'd done his rehab down in Norwich, he's came back up with the club and probably been thinking,
double check.
Yeah, hang on, am I definitely at Darcy Park? Because this doesn't look anything like what it did 12 months ago. But I mean, even look, brand new state-of-the-art pitches. I love the fact they've got the head tennis and the samba stuff for Joe Linton and Bruno. As you say, the outside looks much better. The reception looks much better. It's just absolutely fantastic. And to think this isn't even the end product of this, and eventually they will move to a brand new training ground altogether. It's very, very exciting. It'll be very exciting for the players as well.
Yeah, much more to come. And as Aaron says there, where Newcastle are going to be training in 3, 4, 5 years' time is going to be the interesting bit as well. But overly refreshing to see them putting so much money into the training ground as it is at present. We're going to just talk briefly about potential incomings this summer. A lot of rumours going around. So let's start with Calvin Phillips and Newcastle's rumoured interest in him. Reported this week that Newcastle pretty much made an approach for him. Eddie Howe likes him, but that Phillips is likely to stop at Manchester City and fight for his place. Now, my view on that is that if that is what has happened and Phillips has turned around or his people or whatever have gone, no, I'm sorry, I'm not interested in moving to Newcastle. I'm stopping here. That's the end of it. Because he doesn't know what his future holds at Manchester City. I think the story said he's waiting to see kind of whether he's offered a way into first team football permanently. But for me, if you don't want to join Newcastle at the first opportunity you've been asked, then you don't get a second chance.
And I think what this ownership's shown is that if players don't want to come, they aren't going to force it. And if they want to, stay at other clubs, they'll let that be. And yeah, I think I would agree. I think Calvin Phillips was a fantastic player. He'd improve this Newcastle squad as a whole. But is he the type of player you would really, be rolling the red carpet out for? I'm not too sure. Not after the last 18 months of his career, anyway.
Yuri Tillemans is another one who's seen his stock really fall away. I don't think he finished the season in a positive light at Leicester City. Obviously, it's a bit of a mess there. They're going to lose quite a few of their players, but he's been released now. At one time, rumoured to be a massive move to Manchester United back in the day. Look, clearly a talented player, but one for Newcastle?
I think if you'd asked 6 months ago or a year ago, I'd be saying yes. But I think the way he down tools at Leicester, I mean, the last game of the season, he was just walking about, and I thought, that does not look like a player you want when you really the chips are down. So yeah, for me, not at the moment. I think maybe in a year or two if he picks himself up, but not at the minute.
And Iosi Perez released by Leicester as well.
No. we've had this conversation for months, and every time Perez's name or his future gets brought up, you're like, but let's bring him back.
Whoa, I wouldn't say I'm
No,
that
no,
optimistic
no.
about it.
You've brought it up on this podcast many times. If it was
Twice.
up to me, we wouldn't have brought it up. Really?
Twice?
Really? This is
But my point being, it's just quite astonishing to see how far he's fallen off, and £30 million and just released. And what's happened at Leicester's, they've let a lot of expensive players go. Obviously, going out the Championship hasn't helped. The situation of having so many out of contract definitely aided their fall in the Championship. But look, a lot of people on Twitter, and I'm not saying I necessarily agree with this, but talking about that home trained rule, however you want to pronounce it, about obviously the Champions League squad, bringing someone like Perez back. If Newcastle don't want to go out and spend loads of money on a third striker because they know it might be a little bit difficult to keep that striker happy because you're going to be behind Wilson and Isak if they stay fit, do you go to someone like Perez, who didn't necessarily leave in the best of circumstances, force his way to Leicester, but who would probably be quite happy coming to sit on the bench, being called upon when he's needed, which probably wouldn't be that often if the other two stay fit. Does he fill a gap for what Newcastle United need right now?
Do you think he fills the gap for what they need right now?
Well, I would like them to go and spend 20, 30 million pound on another top class striker, but then that leads you to how do you keep him happy? But if we're talking about them having to cut their cloth accordingly, not Iosi Perez specifically, but do you look at someone who's in a situation who will accept he doesn't come in to play first team football, he doesn't play every single week, but still has enough talent that when he's added on at 75 minutes, there's still a threat of him grabbing a goal?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's why, at the Chronicle, obviously last week or the week before, we reported about Lucas Moura. That didn't maybe get the best reaction from fans because of how that ended for him, but he's just been released from Spurs. He can still do a job. I mean, he showed that in the last day of the season. They've got to shop clever. They've got to look at that low market and the free agent market. But I just think not for me on Perez.
I mean, I heard someone yesterday talking about Tim Krul. There's another one who could come in.
Or Fraser Forster. That both of those being linked as well.
So no Perez for you. I already knew that would be the answer. Very interesting indeed. Brief word on Spurs appointing Ange Postecoglou. That was not how you pronounce his name. Postecoglou.
Close.
Postecoglou. I'm getting better. I'm terrible with big names. Postecoglou. There we go. Interesting.
Really, I'm so intrigued because on the face of it, when he got linked, I just thought, what are Spurs doing? But actually, you delve deeper into that record, you see the reaction of Celtic fans, who, by the way, are absolutely devastated that he's gone. I'm so intrigued to see how he gets on. It probably one of the worst run Premier League clubs as well.
Do you know what? My fear isn't for my fear is for him, not because of his talent or ability. I think if he'd gone to a Villa, perhaps, or Brighton, I think he'd stand a much better chance of doing well. But a bit like Pochettino going to Chelsea, there's so many fires you have to put out before you even start to look at the rebuilding process. At two clubs who already spent bookloads of money, so they're going to have to be even more clever than Newcastle are when it comes to financial fair play. Is that a right move for him?
I think the financials of it and what he's going to get personally for leaving Celtic and coming to Tottenham, that's probably played a factor. It's managing in the top league, quite a historic club in Tottenham, but you look at the big top class experienced managers that have fallen by the wayside at that club, Mourinho, Conte, just to name a few in the last 5 years. You're walking into a club where Daniel Levy doesn't want to spend any money because they've always spent too much. They've got £1 billion stadium that they're going to be repaying for about 10 years. I don't know. It's so intriguing, but I'm really excited to see how he gets on and whether he can actually turn Spurs around as well.
Yeah, I mean, for him, I wish him well. Obviously, not too well that he jumps Spurs back up above Newcastle United, but it's always nice to see someone who's been on his journey get a shot at the big time.
And when you look at what he's done, by the way, in Australia with the national team, at Celtic, at Yokohama, whatever he was in Japan, he's won everywhere he's been. So, I wouldn't be too quick to write him off personally.
Right. Shall we get on to what everyone's here for? The awards for last season. We'll start, Aaron, with player of the season.
Look, I've got to give so many honourable mentions because so many could have won it. Pope, Longstaff, Trippier, Wilson, so many could have won it, but purely for the consistency and how good he is these days, Big Joe.
Yes. Yep, Joe Linton's mine. I've banged the drum for long enough this season that he deserves to win it. It's the consistency element.
Yeah.
Just been an absolute unit. Teams are terrified of him. As John Gibson said on the end of season review part 2, which you can find on our podcast app, defenders used to bully him. And now he plays like Hercules.
Yep.
Don't think I could have put it better myself.
Very good point. And also, if you look at his stats this season, I think, Bruno was probably in the top 3 passers in the league, but actually a little bit further down, Joe was definitely in the top 10 as well. He's improved that part of his game as well.
Adding goals to his game, gets in with the tackles. Maybe needs a few yellow cards hopefully next season, but hey, if it's working, why change that? So Joe Linton, player of the season for me and Aaron. Goal of the season.
Again, there'd be a lot of mentions where you think they could get in. Miggy himself probably could have had, a full competition dedicated to himself. For me, it was Miggy's against Fulham. The volley with the outside of his foot, little 1-2 with Bruno. That was the goal. I think that pretty much started off that purple patch in front of goal. He sort of had to take it on his left because he doesn't have a right foot, but the way he did it was absolutely fantastic. So I think that would be mine.
You see, I haven't chosen this just to be difficult, but I have gone extremely out there. I don't think anyone would have guessed.
Can I guess?
Go on then.
Ooh.
I don't think.
I think we might have had a convo about this off air, so I might be cheating a little bit here. Was it one of the goals against West Ham?
It was.
Yeah, I'll let you explain it.
So it was Joe Linton's first against West Ham when Cher put the ball through the middle and it went close to the VR and he was well onside and he puts it past the keeper. But if you rewind that play before Cher's pass, there's 12 other passes and it was just Newcastle being controlled and disciplined. Then Cher pulling the trigger and Joe Linton, being absolutely clinical in front of goal. And for me, it just summed up Newcastle United at its very best. Eddie Howe's Newcastle United at their very best, being comfortable on the ball, being patient, and then going in for the kill, and then being clinical. So that was my goal of the season. But I tell you what, Newcastle United released a video on YouTube the day and just had, I think, 10 or 12 goals for potential goal of the season. There were so many that were missed out. Isaac against Forest, like John Gibson picked. You had Wilson against Nottingham Forest on the first day of the season. Yeah. Beautiful finish.
Cher on the first day of the season against Forest. Isaac against Liverpool was up there. Miggy's against
Wilson's against City, I think was a good finish, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, there's so many you could pick, which was good team goals, and maybe because they're not,
it's flashy and
30-yard strikes or whatever, your volleys, or what have you, they don't really get the mention. But so many good team goals, and it's been a pleasure to be able to, actually go through and try and pick one. But yeah, for me, Joe Linton's against West Ham, but you could pick that one against. When he brought it against Spurs, when he brought it down so well.
Murphy against Spurs.
Isaac against Spurs, that pass from Willock.
Yeah, I know.
Beautiful. Most improved player?
Easy. Sean Longstaff.
Sean Longstaff?
Yeah, easily.
Okay. Would you like to?
Do I need to say anything else? He was fighting to save his Newcastle career, and now he's one of the most missed players. I think he's improved his all-around game. He's got a better understanding. He's getting in better attacking positions. Big Sean. I've been banging the drum for so long. I've got to give him one of the awards.
So Scott McTominay not coming in to replace him?
No, I don't think so. I'm not sure I've ever said that.
I'm going to go Fabian Cher, which might surprise a few people because I was his harshest critic. But he's just come on so much in that year. And I think one of the questions actually we got on Twitter from Ian Crowe was about, do Newcastle United need to bring in a first team centre back, or do they bring in someone younger who can learn from Botman and Cher? And because Cher's played so well, it's a really interesting question. It really is. And I'll get your response to that in a moment. But yeah, for me, Fabian Cher, most improved player, because he just looks so more switched on. Yes, there's still moments when he has those lapses of concentration, but I think he's really helped Botman settle in. He can pick a pass. And yeah, for me, most improved player of the season.
Yeah, but again, look, I think Miggy's probably up there. Murphy's probably up there. Joe Willock's so much better. There's a lot of players that we could have picked in that one as well.
Yeah, but the question on the defender, do you bring in a young defender? Do you bring in someone to rival? I guess both of them. Obviously, you've got Dan Burn there as well.
I would like to see Fabian Schär keep his place in the team next season. I think he's earned it. I think, as you say, he's so much better than he was. He was, I think he was probably even better last season than he was under Rafa. I would like to see a younger, right-sided centre back come in further down the line to eventually replace Schär and play alongside Botman.
Interesting. Peter Foster says Murphy versus Everton, the Isaac dribble was amazing. Do you know what, right? But if I was Jacob Murphy, I feel like, when someone brings in a cake, right? And someone's spent all night baking this cake, and then someone at a birthday party just puts the candles on and gets the credit for it.
But is that not Isaacs against Tottenham because of Willock's assist?
The finish from Isaac
was good, but it wasn't goal the season finish worthy, was it? Do you know what I mean?
Maybe we should have an assist competition this season.
Very,
well, we spoke about it a few months ago, didn't we? For me, I still think Willock's is better than Isaacs, but please don't at me. Surprise package of the season
in terms of the player, Miggy.
Oh, hello.
Purely because of nobody thought he had goals in this game, and all of a sudden he was surprising everyone with unbelievable goals. But again, I think Murphy, Longstaff, all those are definitely up there as well.
Stuart says Almiron as well there. I'm tempted to say Joe Linton.
Really? Did you not expect them to keep that game at the level it was?
I thought that it would have to tail off at some point, but it just hasn't. And long may it continue. I don't think it will fall off now, but I did think we'd get to October, November time, and it wouldn't. He wouldn't still be at the levels that he performed the season prior. But he's just continued to go, and that has surprised me.
Dan Burn as well. Nobody expects him to be a very, very competent left back. Surprised everyone. Yeah, there's a lot.
Jacob Murphy.
Exactly, Murphy.
So there's two here. Let's go with the game of the season.
Purely because I haven't just never seen anything like this in St James's Park. I think I'll have to go Tottenham at home. I think that'll be quite a popular answer though.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you. Let's go game of the season, but in terms of
the entire game.
But in terms of more of what it meant for the season. So it's better to say the turning point. So for me, it would be the Spurs game away when they beat them at the Spurs Stadium, or potentially the Brighton 4-1. I know that's right towards the end, but I just think that was such an important win in terms of the Champions League, and you kind of felt it was done there. But for me, I've always said that Spurs win was the most important win under Eddie Howe, and up until that Brighton game, maybe the Manchester United game at St James's Park after the final, I would stick by it. I think
I'll go away from the Premier League. I'll go for one of the Carabao Cup ones, and I think maybe the Leicester win where Burn scored, or even the second leg where Longstaff scored quite early. Yeah, I mean, everyone's saying the City 3-3 draw, which I'd sort of forgot about. It was that early.
That was just a tremendous day.
That was just a fantastic game. Yeah, there's a lot of options, but for me, those two cup games at home, on the way to the final, were really, really good.
Jonathan says, the surprise of the season was finding myself worrying that the absence of Murphy and Longstaff might jeopardise our Champions League qualification. And that, Jonathan, absolutely spot on with that. And all that remains to be done then, Aaron, is what are you expecting for next season? I don't think we've missed any awards. I think they are the main awards.
Yeah, I think they're the main ones. Look, next season, it's going to be a different ball game entirely. There's a lot of examples of teams going out, qualifying for the Champions League or the Europa League and having stinkers in the league next season. I don't think that'll happen, but I think we've got to be wary. If they can have a decent run in the cups, top 6 finish, I think I'd be happy with that.
Roger says a cup and 5th. What do I expect next season? Top 6 and a cup run. You'd like to get a big team in the Champions League as well, and hopefully progress into the next round. But also it all relies on what they do in the transfer window and what have you. So we'll come back in a few months' time to answer that question properly. Me and Aaron will be back next week, hopefully on the Monday. You're not away?
Nope. I'm here as far as I'm aware.
This is it now. So we'll be back
Yeah.
next Monday, all things being well. We do have two-part to the season review, one from Sam Mullen and one from John Gibson. They're on the podcast app now. If you scroll down, you can listen to them. We've also got the live event, one with Nobby Solano and one from a panel, including Aaron, Simon Bird from The Mirror, and Matthew Raisbeck, as well as Lee and Kieran. So hit that up on our podcast app if you haven't listened to it already. Some really interesting discussions in front of a live audience. Leave us a written review as well. If you can do, help us get the podcast out to a wider audience. Head over to chroniclelive.co.uk and make sure you fill in the end of season survey. It's a big survey. We want to know your thoughts on everything to do with Newcastle United. There's 10 questions perhaps, which we want your responses to. They're all multiple choice, so we give you a bit of help with the option. But please do fill that in. We really like to get a kind of feel of things about how you guys are feeling and what's to come. And for myself and Aaron, thank you very much for tuning in, and we will see you very soon.